Welcome to Womb Talk. I'm your host, Elizabeth Vanderbilt, the owner and founder of Fruitful Womb Doula Services. In Womb Talk, we like to go over different topics that are acceptable for all audiences. We're not medical professionals. Everything on this podcast is just to educate you so that you can make better choices for your body. If you have a passion for all things women's health, then let's start listening. Today, we have the incredible Tanya. Oh my God.
I
I
love
was
this.
I'm so sorry.
Don't get
I'm
sorry.
stopping right at even your last name. You could say it in a second for us.
Okay.
You're going to share with us your birth story. I've got about 5 questions, but it's raw. We like to go off topic. So just anyone new listening, that's what you're going to get. It's just going to be vulnerable and hopefully everybody enjoys it. If that's not your cup of tea, listen to another one. So I guess tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your official pronunciation of your name, please. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I am Tanya Lemieux, and some people might know me through Instagram, the Wisdom Weaver Medicines. And I am super passionate about reconnecting women back home internally to themselves through lots of different modalities, but specifically through plant medicines, natural alternatives, and just really sourcing a way back home to the land and to our ancestral lines. So that's a bit about me. I am a mom of 4 biological children, and I am so gifted in this lifetime to also have a bonus son. And so, yeah, I'm excited to talk about birth. I have always been so passionate about birth and birth stories. And I love hearing women share their experiences and their knowledge. And I think it's so important right now for women to hear these stories as a way to heal, a way to be seen and to be heard. Because I think once, we have our babies, a lot of the focus and attention can draw towards the child that we've delivered, and most moms and their stories are lost and forgotten. And so I thank you so much for creating this space, Elizabeth, and just having that opportunity to light me up internally and talk something that I'm so passionate about, and hoping that it will help and support other women in your mission.
Well, I'm glad you're here because I have always loved birth, and so I get a little giddy. I'm so honored I get to sit here and listen to people tell me their birth story. I'm like, I didn't get to be there, but I got to listen to it and hear it. So like, yay! Like that little inner child in me that was like would read every book that she could was always lacking the pregnancy stories and like the birth and like how it happened. And I was like, one day I will just ask people, and I literally did that. I came up with the modality to like ask people like, can you tell me all the nitty gritty of your birth, like please?
Oh, and like how amazing is that, right? Like that's not a common question that
Yeah,
as women we are asked, right? Or even you know, sharing light on exposing our children or
yeah,
younger souls to this piece of life. You know, when a woman is in her birth, this is her fullest of activation,
yeah.
right? This is a divine power. And so I feel you. I'm the one that like on my phone watching people from all over the world birth,
Yeah.
not knowing anything about them, and my children, including my sons, being no surprised by me talking about birth or placenta, nutrients, and just all of these elements that really are messy but beautiful, and finding that beauty in the messiness.
Well, I love it. I'm so glad that you're here. And I guess I'll just start with the one of the questions right off the bat for us a little bit and
Yeah, sounds
kind of
great.
dive in. I'm kind of switching up from a little bit of the other ones because I wanted to see how the flow of the story goes in a different order. So you're my experiment on it. So apologies.
Oh, I will be your experiment.
Okay, I love it. So I'm curious on what was your knowledge of childbirth prior to giving birth? Like, did you have a good relationship with your mother that she passed down info to you, or maybe like a friend, or like was it just like, oh my god, I'm pregnant, now what?
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is a great question.
Okay,
So I was a very young first time mom. I was 19 when I was
wow,
pregnant. my first husband and myself, there was quite an age gap between us. And so he wanted children right away. And, naturally, I knew internally from a very young age, I loved children. I loved the energy, the essence, all of it that was contained in being a mother. And in that timeline of my life and in the timeline of my younger years, I actually didn't have a really strong connection with my mom. There were lots of gaps between our relationship. And when I had graduated, it was kind of flowing in like a hit and miss, kind of relationship. There were pockets where she was there and then pockets where we were a little bit removed from each other. And so when I got pregnant, um, I was, this 19-year-old, still, child essence. When I look back now of myself, thinking like, wow, I don't know what to do. And this is like a little bit scary. And so I had a girlfriend who was about 6 months, uh, 6 months long further than me. And I remember going to her house and we were sitting around the fire. And I always love this part because there's always so much beauty in stories shared around fires. And there's lots of key stories in my life that have stuck with me. And they're always around a fire, which is just beautiful in its own. But we're sitting around the fire and she's talking about options for delivery. And she's like, yeah, I'm going to have a home birth. And I was like, oh, like what does that mean? Like, can you tell me more? And I think that's something that I've always really loved about myself is like I've never been closed-minded. I've always like grasping at all the information and knowledge I could. And I think being that young, there's a little bit of like naiveness, right, to me that was still there. Like I didn't really have the education. So it was like, I will take anything. So I remember her sharing with me, her birth plan and kind of how she was going to go about this. And her mom at the time was taking her schooling to be a doula. And so we were talking about all these different things. And like, as she's sharing, something just felt so right within my body. It was like there's a piece of remembering that I knew this belonged in my lineage, in my line as a woman. And I remember not even like doubting it. Like it was just like, oh, I left her house and I remember turning to my husband and saying, this is how we're gonna bring our baby into the world. And with the masculine energy, oftentimes you get this like very scared, stunned look because uh, a lot of times men are very like medical linear.
Yeah.
And so, it kind of threw him off axis and he was just like, oh, like, I don't know if this is a good idea. Like, you want to have our baby at a home birth. And in our community, that was something that was very uncommon also. So in our area that we live in, which is just near Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, we actually don't have midwives located in our area of district. Our closest district is Saskatoon.
Yeah.
And at the time, they only had 5 or 6 midwives on hand. And so I remember my friend at the time telling me, you need to call like as soon as you find out, because that's the only way you might get accepted, because they have such a waiting list.
Yeah.
And so I think it was like the next morning I called, and still like a little bit like unresponsive from my husband and like a little bit like, he was still unknown. I was like, I know this is the way. And so I called and I ended up getting in. And I remember my first appointment with her. So I had a few appointments with my doctor, my physician doctor, and they were always like really quick, right? It was like
Yeah.
go in, quick conversation,
Bye.
yeah, bye. Like nothing personal, nothing like, you didn't really feel like you were walking away confident or knowledgeable or supported even. And I remember going to my first appointment with my midwife and not really knowing what to expect. I walked in and she spent an hour with me. an hour with me, seated on a couch, and just like answered and answered any questions I had, you know, any fears, like listened and had educational responses, but also emotional responses back to like validate and understand me. And because at that time I wasn't, my mother and mine relationship was still kind of weaving in and out. I remember leaving and feeling like, wow, that connection of like motherhood, like
Yeah.
my midwife connected me in a way to my baby, my that I hadn't born yet, in a way that I didn't think was possible. And so, to long-windedly answer the question, that was my first experience, and I didn't have a lot of knowledge, and so um, from there, from meeting my midwife, she was a basket of knowledge and resources, and really started to pull me into a world that I had no idea existed, to a remembering that had been lost essentially. And so I delved into books and into different documentaries, and I just really submersed myself because I thought, this is a huge piece of my story. This is my transition from, one season in my life to the next. And I want to have as much resource as I can in it, right? The good, the bad, the messy, the clean, all of it. And so I really took that opportunity as a way to just open up and receive.
I love that. I love it so much. Like the whole, and you were saying about like the fires too. And I was thinking like maybe that's just like your symbol through life. It's like if it's an important moment, better watch out. There might be a fire, and like that's a key element. So like, I have questions, but we shall continue with the podcast. Otherwise, I'm gonna get off topic here. But the next one is really just to tell us your story. Like you mentioned, you had 4 biological children. So if you would like to just do one, or as a combination, like um how it went, like what details ever you would like to share, and then at the end of it, in your eyes, did you see that your births were supported, or if there was something you would do differently? So those are the two like after questions.
Mm.
So I'll let you just start by telling us of the birth, but those are your after point questions.
Amazing. I'm sure it will just like naturally come into those
Yeah.
answering. So if I get off topic too, please just steer me back because I tend to do that. So my first, he is almost 13 here in a couple weeks, well, a month actually. And so that was my first with the midwife in Saskatoon, and her name was Debbie. And at that time, because they were in Saskatoon, you had to find your own place of birthing. So whether that be like a hotel, an Airbnb, a family member, you had to secure your own place, as they wouldn't travel to your location,
Oh wow.
just due to radius. So my appointments obviously got a little bit more frequent when I got closer to my delivery date. And we were around that time. It was like 4 days before I was due. And we were at home in Prince Albert at the time, and my water had broke. And being a first time mom, I said to my husband, I turned to him and I said, I think I peed myself, or this is my water. I don't know what to expect. I was like, can you smell it? And so, being a champion he got down the ground and was like smelling it. And he's like, no, this is your water. And I just found it so fascinating because naturally, just before that, my body had went through like almost like a shedding of itself. My bowels fully released, and I remember just it was probably 10 minutes before that happened. After that happened, and contractions started picking up, and so we messaged my midwife and my doula. At this birth, I actually used my friend's mother
Oh,
who
awesome.
got certified, yeah, and was a huge support too, and like also not just a support for me, but a support for allowing my husband at the time to be a part of the birth. And I think that that's just something so valuable that doulas offer, in my experience, is this like combination of how uh, that that trimester or that transition period, how your partner that you have there or your support system who you have there can be just as involved. You know, we see like a lot of like I remember growing up, you'd see like the dad at work and then showing up after the baby was born. Like it's
Yeah.
funny how we have this like dialogue of what we see maybe in a book or a story of how delivery is. And at the time my husband was like he wanted to be involved in it. And so we timed my contractions and she's like, yeah, make your way to Saskatoon. And so drove to Saskatoon, which is about an hour and 15 minutes. And we ended up at that time in Saskatoon, there was a woman who rented out a little space in her house. It was like a side space and it
Oh,
was like a
okay.
birthing studio. So everything was there. All you basically had to do was show up. So she had the towels, the birthing pool. It was like dimmed lighting. If you want to bring like essential oils, whatever you needed and felt. And so going there, I had created a birth plan. For some of you that might not know what that is, it's just kind of like a vision of how you would like your birth to go. And I learned very quickly in creating that birth plans don't always go as we want, which
Yeah.
is expected. Like birth is its own unplaying wild nature, and so I had like an outline of what I wanted, but knew deep down ultimately the goal was a healthy mom and baby at the end. So however we were to achieve it, it was there, and so we got there and. Uh, I was inspected. And something that I really love about the midwives too is that they try to not check you in in case like bacteria, and different things
Yeah.
could be placed in there. So they don't check you as frequent as as maybe you do in the hospital, let's say. And I will get to that because I did have a hospital birth too. But and so they checked me and she's like, "Hey, you're 4 centimeters, and like what are you calling right now?" And I was like, well, I think I want water. And so we went into the tub and I was like, nope, I don't want water. And I actually had put on my birth plan, I wanted a water birth. And so I like sat in the tub and I got out and I was like, nope, that is not like bringing me comfort, which was really funny because in my pregnancy, I loved the bathtub. I loved like that weight
Yeah.
being just floating, weightlessly. And so got out and I had extreme hip labor. And so I had my ex-husband and my doula both pushing on either side of my hips. And it felt so, I remember sitting there so good and I'm leaning on the ball and I'm going back and forth. And it seemed like labor was really escalating quite quickly for me. I could feel in my body there was, the contractions were getting more intense. Um, in birthing, I've noticed myself, I kind of come back to that animal like mentality that's imprinted in us, where it's like you like dark,
Yeah.
quiet, you don't want to talk. So I really just came inward, and I remember doing, educating myself on like hypnobirthing and your power of breath. And so I kind of just like went into my own state. And I remember being on the ball and, you know, just knowing like each contraction was one step closer to me meeting my baby. And I suddenly, there was like the transition period, and I was like, I need to get on the toilet. And it's funny because prior to this, I had not at once thought that that was a desirable position for myself. And I went onto the toilet, and it just something about opening, that my hips up and opening that space up. It was so comfortable, and I remember looking at my midwife, and I was like, oh my god, I don't know if I can do this. And of course, when you do it with the midwives too, it's a natural birth. They do have like laughing gas here in Saskatchewan that they can put on. Um, I think they have one more thing. I can't remember offhand. Do you happen to know
No, because
like
I
this
haven't
other?
been able to attend a
Okay,
birth here with
in Saskatchewan.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, so they have laughing gas and I think one other thing, but everything is like very naturally done. And so I remember looking at my midwife and being like, I can't do this. Like I might need to go to the hospital. Like this pain is difficult. And when you use the midwife too, you always have to have like a route mapped out to the hospital, knowing like the timelines, just so that if something did occur where you needed like medical assistance of a hospital, then you knew where you were
How to get
going.
there?
Exactly. And so she says to me, Tanya, that tells me you're here. And she looked at me and I just was like, I remember she's like, take your hand. And she's like, I want you to reach. And I'm gonna get emotional. I remember being like, I feel him. And she's like, he's here, Tanya. And so she's like, do you want to push here? Do you want to go to the bed? And at that time, um, it's funny because like now I look back and I'm like, I have no idea why I wanted to go to the bed. I don't know if that was like a programming that,
Yeah.
was within me of like you deliver on the bed. I don't know what it was. But anyways, I went to the bed. So I walked, I think it was 6 steps to the bed and I started pushing. And I remember her just being like, really honoring that flow of the body of like the force of a contraction and how you could feel, your uterus just like propelling baby out. And then, her reminding me to like breathe. And I remember my doula saying, don't push, unless your body's like, listen to your body. And she put some warm compression around um,
The perineum.
the
Yep.
perineum, and she's like, just breathe. And I remember that ring of fire moment where you're just like breathing through it, and instead of just like pushing and forcing, just like breathing, allowing yourself to synchronize with the body. And I then all of a sudden there was this baby, and I remember being like, oh my gosh. And there's this moment of just like complete utter joy and complete shock. And there's so many emotions at one time. It's like you're exhausted and you've won the marathon, the internal marathon. Um and so it was beautiful. It was everything I could have asked for. My doula was so great with me at just, making sure that space was protected. I didn't have any tearing. Um, I didn't have to, seek anything larger than the wisdom I knew internally. I did bleed like I had like a little bit of more blood. Is it hemorrhaging? No. Is it hemorrhaging? It's like where your uterus
Yeah.
isn't fully contracting. Yeah. And so they did just give me a needle to support that. But that was about it. And we stayed there. I think it was for like 6 hours around. So my full birth was 6 hours with my son. So
Oh, wow.
everything was like quite quick. Um, and that's kind of what they thought maybe with the blood is just because it progressed quite quickly for my first. But again, like we sat there and just, laid skin to skin. We didn't cut the umbilical cord right away. I really wanted that delayed clamping and just kind of sat there and enjoyed those moments, those such crucial moments. And so when I got pregnant my second time, this was 3 years later, it was with twins.
Oh, wow.
And yes,
Well,
and
before you start, can I ask one quick question about the last one?
yes,
Just because
yes,
my
yes,
brain was did your doula ask you during transition to stay on the toilet, or did you decide that all by yourself?
all by myself.
Okay,
Yeah,
because
all by
I don't know if she told you or not, but that's like considered the dilation station to make things go faster. And I just was curious if like that was just like your intuition of like moving things along to
ah.
go there, because when we go to the bathroom, that's that whole positioning, right? And so I just was curious if you decided that, or if that was like, hey, you want to try this tip to move things along, or if you just
Oh,
instantaneously did it.
okay, that is amazing because when we get to my last birth story,
Okay.
you've just like pieced so many
Oh.
pieces together for me, which makes complete sense why that position is so desirable for my body.
Okay,
Um,
I'll let you continue. I just had
yeah.
to ask because I was kind of curious if that was like, doula hint or like all on
No,
you?
but I must tell you that like if anyone is ever considering like a doula support, and what's so beautiful about as doulas is you guys can be in any type of birthing scenario. You can be in the
Yeah.
hospital, you
Yeah.
can be a postpartum doula, you can be at a home birth, and that's what I love is like doulas are so um, they're not fully understood. Like they are your voice because when you are in labor and delivery, you're drawing all your energy into that state of being fully present in your body and
Yeah.
supporting it. And so there were a lot of times where I had relayed to my doula, like, these are things I want to try, or these are scents I want. And she was that voice. Like, she'd be like, oh, Tanya, you've shared this with me. Do we want to try this? Or,
Yeah.
hey, Tanya, and I love that. I love that she was that voice and she could just pick up those cues. Like, oh, let's try this. Like I didn't understand hip labor, and so I was just like, oh my gosh, this pain. And she's like, wow, I have like, can we try something? And so having that voice advocating for you was just so important. And there was something even more special to me, like a woman understanding a woman. I don't know, there was like that connection, right? Because although your partner or your husband, in my situation, like he was a huge support and super active. There's still that like gap between
Yeah.
masculine and feminine. Like they just don't fully understand the body to the degree that we hold of, inner knowledge. And so it was amazing just to have that. And so, okay, so I got pregnant with the twins
Yeah. Yeah.
and I was devastated because I could not have a uh, midwife because in Saskatchewan, that's labeled as a high risk pregnancy. And there were pieces of my world that internally crumbled. Um, Getting pregnant with the twins, as a little back shadow here was difficult. It was really hard for us to get pregnant after our first, just balancing out hormones and just, I think just so many dynamics and degrees of that. And so when we got pregnant and I found out that I couldn't use the midwife, I was devastated. I remember reaching out to a good friend of mine who is actually a doula now. She's a doula. She doesn't practice full doulaing at birth. She does classes now. But I remember messaging her and being like, I just want you to like deliver my baby. Like, can you deliver my baby? And there's just so many. I remember just reaching, like I just so badly wanted to not be in the hospital. As I associated the hospital, like injuries, sicknesses,
Yeah.
you know, um, death. Like there were a lot of like pre-notion correlations that I had correlated with the hospital that it didn't feel safe. And when you're in labor, I think that's one of the key components to moving and progressing your labor is feeling safe.
Yeah.
And so I went through my pregnancy and I just kept retrieving and revisiting a lot of the information that I had previously. At this time, the doula that I had used, she had moved to Saskatoon, and I was like, okay, I feel like I have a really good foundation of supports. Um, this one, I should be okay at like not having a doula. They were there at like if I had although they
Gotcha.
weren't there on hand, they were still there. And my girlfriend, who is like one of my closest soul sisters now, this was really the pivot point and where our relationship really strengthened because she was such a support for me. And so I naturally went into labor at 6 weeks early with my twins. And I got to the hospital and I tried to avoid going to the hospital at first. My water had broken the night and I was like, do I really need to go? And they were like, well, infection and everything, like maybe you should just go. And so I just kind of like slowly packed my items, like I will get there.
Someday.
and and so we got there and it was just something different at that time, and I can't speak for, possibly how it's shifted now, But at that time, you know, you walk into a building with like bright sterile lights and sounds, and um, I just personally, it didn't make my body feel safe. And so we go into the room, and they're hooking up all the cords, and they want to monitor baby's heart rate, and you know, all these beautiful safety precautions, which I understand because you know they're trained in that, right? And that's their training, and they're doing that to make sure you're safe. But there was something with that that just didn't work for me, and I don't think there's anything more fierce than a woman in labor. Like
Yeah.
when a woman is in labor, like
World's gonna
watch out.
burn.
Yeah.
Y'all are
So
careful.
I remember like taking off the cords, and I was like, I do not want to lay on this bed. I want to move. I want to stand up. I want to sway my hips. And I got a little bit of resistance actually. And the nurse at the time was like, no, you can't. You're having this stuff on. And so every time she left the room, I was unfortunately that difficult patient who kept pulling things off. And my husband at the time was like, "Oh my god!" Like you could just see it, but he wouldn't tell me like, you know, Tanya, no. But he was just like, "Oh, we're gonna make some people upset in here." And so the nurse came in, and I remember her saying like, "Oh, the anesthesiologist is leaving. Like, do you want an epidural?" And at this time, I wasn't in like active labor. Like, it didn't feel intense to the point where
Yeah.
I couldn't handle it. And then also, you know, thankfully having that previous experience, knowing like I can get through that difficult transition. I
Yeah.
can get through the pain with my breath and with hypnobirthing and with smells and with movement. And so I was like, no, I don't want it. And you know, I kind of got a little bit of a smirk on my face, like, oh, okay, like if you're not gonna take it, you're not getting it then. And I was like, okay. And so she left, and it was about an hour in, and I was like, whew, I'm ready to push. And when I had gotten there, I think I was only like 3 centimeters. You know, but there wasn't a connection in a way like where, you know, they knew about my previous labors, how quick it was, or, you know,
Yeah.
there was just that gap for myself in my experience. And so I knew right away, you know, it was like my body was remembering, like, oh, we know where we are. And I looked over to my ex-husband, and I was like, this is it. Yeah, I'm ready. And he's like, what do you mean you're ready? And I was about 3.5 hours in, maybe only. So I'd only been at the hospital for maybe an hour and a half. And I was like, I'm ready to push. And so he's like, okay. And you know, he can tell he's scared to like call the nurse because I've already probably did all the things that
Taking
I'm
it
not
over.
supposed to do, you know? And she came in, and it was the same woman that I had experienced at this time of my delivery. And I said, I'm ready to push. And she kind of giggled at me, and she's like, no, honey, you're not. Like, this, it's labor, you know, like your epidural, what person's gone now, but it's, you know, and I was like, I need you to check me. And she's like, oh, like, you know, kind of resistant a little bit. And I was like, I need you to check. I'm ready to push. And so she pulls up the thing. She's like, well, you need to get on your back and let me hook these things up. So, you know, I'm like, you know, trying to get hooked up while I'm like, my body is ready. Like it's
Yeah.
pulsing to be to ready. And um my uterus is contracting, and she pulls it up, and she's like, oh my god, you know, my baby's head was right there, like I was in crowning stage. And she's like, you can't push, the doctor isn't here. And I said, I am pushing because my body wants me to push.
Yeah.
And so it was like an emergency alert. They're, you know, they're sending things on the intercom, calling all the nurses in because they had no doctor on hand. And roll me into the because they're high risk, it's like in the basically like a surgery room,
Yeah.
like,
Because
you
in
know,
case you need a C-section.
yes. And so I'm pushing, and I'm just like allowing my body to kind of surrender, and I want to move, you know, naturally, because that's how I experienced my first delivery. And I kept being reminded, like, no, you need to lay on your back, you need to stay still. And I remember just feeling like internally frustrated, like, no, I know my body's wisdom. I need to honor it, and I need to move. And so I kept like pushing my body back. And one of the nurses, who ended up being an absolute blessing in my time there, she just said, like, I got you. Like, it's okay, Tanya, I got you. And I actually had known her from high school and hadn't
Oh,
seen her for lots of years.
yay.
Yes, but it was like that familiar, right? And her energy, from my remembering of high school, had always been like soft and tending and caring. And so it was like, okay, I have someone that I feel like is in my court, you know?
Yep.
And so she was the one who like kept walking me through and verbalizing. And my first baby came out, and it was a girl. And I remember, hearing her cry, and but they just removed her right away, and like feeling that like piece of like almost like heartbreak. Like it was just like I don't even really, my baby's just like gone. Like this
Yep.
baby that was in me. And then they're like, okay, we're breaking your water. Are you ready? And it was just like, what's happening? They broke the second water. And then I had my son, and he at first didn't cry. And so I know nothing that's going on at this point. They take him away, and they're like, he's having troubles breathing. And I remember it feeling like utter chaos. And just like feeling into that right now, and just like feeling like there was pieces of that was taken away from me in those moments. And it was like, okay, we're taking your babies away, we need to make sure they're okay. And I remember being like, no, I want to put them on me. And the doctor had come in. Actually, I should share this. The doctor had come in right at when the second one, the nurses delivered the first, and then the second one, she was like, I ran the red lights, and was like coming in chaotic, also putting on her things to catch my second baby. And so yeah, I remember being wheeled away, and I felt so gifted that again I could have these babies naturally and vaginally, and yet I felt so lost. I felt so empty. And um, just the unknown, right? No one was really sharing a whole lot. No one was. And so my experience, to kind of fast forward, to sum it up in a really small container, my daughter ended up breathing well. She was latching. They kept them in a like the birthing
Yeah.
incubator room. My son was on oxygen. They kept poking at him to get different tests done because they wanted to see different things. And I really struggled with that. And um, I think it really set the tone for my postpartum journey, being in the hospital. So I was only in there for, I think it was 6 days we got released, 5 days, but on the sixth day we got released. And um, I've never felt so disconnected from myself and so disconnected from my babies at that time. My son at home, who was 3, um, wasn't allowed. I barely saw him. There was even like the visiting times were odd, and it was really funky. We had of course, extreme fire warning at the time in our area, and the air quality was really bad. Of course. And so that was also a consideration on me going home. My babies had to pass like the car seat test. My son had to come off oxygen. And I remember many times in my loss period there messaging my supports, my friend who was a doula, and being like, where's my voice here? How can I activate? This is what I believe. How do I say this? And I got a lot of resistance on my son, who was in the incubator on machines, taking him out and having skin on skin, because I knew that my babies needed that. As their mother, I knew that. I knew they needed to be together on my chest, feeling my heart, you know, bringing comfort into like their known of all they knew. And I had that one beautiful nurse take the time and the energy to unhook the cords and to do the things to help me achieve that. Whereas I got resistance from a lot of the other staff. And so I remember just having those moments. And the pediatrician actually came in one day, and he was like, oh, you're the super mom. And he giggled. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, you're the mom that says no to everything, but can I tell you something? And I was like, well, what's that? And he's like, you fighting for your babies is what's making them stronger. And I was like, thank you. Like, and this was a male pediatrician, and I felt so validated in that moment because I had fought for breastfeeding my son, who they told me, he can't latch. We're not taking him out of the incubator. We're going to feed him formula. And I was like, no, like, I want to breastfeed him. I will pump, I will find a way. And I kind of kept getting resistance, but I kept using my voice. And so we got out of there in 5 days, and I remember the pediatrician saying, "This is amazing, Tanya. Like, the how your son was born with the information I was given, and your daughter, I would have thought you would have been in here for weeks. But because you were an advocate for yourself and you knew what was needed for your babies, such as breastfeeding and skin to skin, they are doing amazing. And so, like, you owe that to yourself." And that was a really nice piece into my body of just like knowing. But following that birth, there was a lot of trauma I had to work with.
Yeah.
That later would be exposed after the postpartum. I did go into postpartum um, depression. Now looking back, when you're in the waves in the ocean, you can't really quite see it. Um, but it was definitely a dark time for me. And I'm just so grateful that I had the supports I had at that time that just kept bringing light and support and nurturing to my body and to my soul and my mind, because there were pieces that just felt really dark in me. And so I spent, after that postpartum stage, I spent years dissecting, the traumas that were contained within that experience for myself. And in that transition time, I actually went through a divorce with their dad, which was quite strenuous on the body as a whole too. And so I'm in postpartum and also experiencing the levels of disconnect through my marriage, and so many life altering things that now I can see the gifts. Being 10 years later, I see the seeds that were planted at that time. But it was definitely a dark time for me. And so, um, yeah, I really took that opportunity to delve into myself. And if there was anything in that blessing, it was that it really got me to look at uncomfortable pieces within myself and to explore traumas and experiences and our ability to heal ourselves when we talk as women, when we share, and when we give ourselves permission to be nurtured by other women also. And so that was a big time for me. And 3 years later, I met my husband now, and he something he really wanted was a biological child from me and him. And I remember being like, I don't want to even step in those waters again. And I really had, still that wall up. I had this like beautiful essence of what delivery and pregnancy and all the trimesters could be. But then I also had this piece of my life that I was still really working on, an experience that like kind of scared me from pregnancy. And of course, like not knowing, like, would I have twins again?
Yeah.
Would I be, not the unknown, the beautiful unknown of life, right? Wait, do you have any questions about my twins' birth before I move to my last
No,
one?
it's just like the inner warrior in me sometimes gets like very like try to take a deep breath, because like hearing that, like there's so many people that don't have the voice like you did. Like you were very brave and strong in that moment to like say what you wanted. Like you were talking about unhooking the monitors, and I'm like, you go girl, like you did great that you were doing that. But then like hearing on how much you had to fight, like you were saying how that like was something to work through, and you're still like that you were still working through it. And that those people, they do that to so many people, and they don't even realize what the lifelong attachment, like they like we were just I was talking about this with someone else the other moment ago, and it's like a risk prevention. That's what hospitals have set up. It's to prevent risk, like to prevent something happening. But in the prevention, you have now caused something else. So sure, this was prevented, but what was the aftermath of it? So
Yeah.
like the inner me, I'm just like trying to stay calm a little bit, because that, like, it's frustrating because there's a lot of people that aren't able to speak. And so like that doctor, he said, oh, normally your baby would have been in there with you for weeks, and that's just so normal to them, and they don't even
Mm.
bat an eye. And I'm like, as like the other women who there were being like against you a little in a sense, like my brain is like, don't, if you didn't even have a child, can you not seeing that happen? Have, like, if she said no twice, she's taking it off, understand that then. So like,
I know.
there's
Yeah.
a place for hospitals, and I completely firmly believe that they are safety measures for certain things. But a lot of time, it just adds extra problems to a lot of people's lives as well. So it was listening to that, I'm like, you gotta be calm, try not to say it, like, don't get your face too scruggly up. I don't want to be like,
No, it's funny because I can feel it, like watching in the video, and I can feel it, and I think that's a natural response
yeah,
to birth keepers
yeah,
and birth weavers, and that's truly the work of a doula and a midwife. And don't get me wrong, I've come in contact now with amazing women doctors who
yeah, yeah,
do
yeah.
provide that, but you can tell the different energy levels, and it is disheartening from someone who hold so much passion for birth, because there is an opportunity for us to access something larger within
Yeah.
ourselves. And when women have to fight so strongly, and like you said, I know tons of women who, have stopped at one baby because of their experience. And
It was
that
just
saddens
too
me.
much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, then with this last one, we kind of sat on it for a while, and I really had to dissect, what was my reasoning for not wanting to get pregnant. And it all kind of lingered down to that last experience. And so I really had to sit with it and shift my mindset with it. And like, what could I learn from that scenario? If I was placed back in that scenario again, what could I learn? And, it really was a fear mentality that was holding me back, because, you know, deep down I wanted a biological baby with my husband that I had now, because of the love that we had created in our home, and the co-parenting dynamic that we had created. And um, that was so special for me, and I knew it was special for him to have that child, two people that love each other, and to have that baby together. And so, um, after like lots of processing and figuring out, like, okay, Tanya, let's not let fear be what stops us from accessing something that we want, and you can learn from this situation. And so we ended up getting pregnant. And the minute I found out it was one baby, I was like, "Oh my goodness," and I
Hallelujah.
had yeah, exactly. I was like, "Hallelujah!" Like the universe is watching out for me. It knows what supports I need right now. And so I called the midwife right away, and I was so excited. I got on with my exact same midwife that delivered my first, which was full circle for me, and just felt so special. Like, I remember when that first piece lined up, I was like, this pregnancy is meant to heal me. It's meant to heal and to teach me and to show me lessons. This is the full circle of my time in pregnancy and caring of physical baby. And so it came out for a full circle. We did some classes. So it was like I think it was like there was like 6 classes, I think, altogether over a span of your whole pregnancy in trimesters. And it just was like extra information that our doula supported. So she would be there with us at the birth, but she would educate us and give us all the tools. And it was the same person who I had messaged when I had my twins and ended up being a soul sister. So it just felt like naturally. Like, I was like, I would just want this person to deliver my baby in a bush. Like,
Yeah.
that is, after like everything was aligning, I was like, we could just like have it like on the land, like in a birthing hut, and like you can come deliver, like just so many things that um that I just like picture in birth now and just picture like the stories. It's like my cellular body's remembering the stories of the people before us, you know? And so I had yeah, so this pregnancy, it was amazing. I had some pelvic pressure throughout my pregnancy just because of the twins. My uterus was not as tight as it
Yeah.
was obviously previously. And so I did have some pelvic pressure, but my sister in law lives in Saskatoon. So she said, you are more than welcome to have your baby here, which I am so grateful for because it was a space too, like an energetic portal space that I was familiar with, that my sister-in-law, has lives in, and she also provides this like nurturing energy to myself and is very soft on my body and on my soul. And so it just felt so like aligned. And so we went there. We were in Saskatoon and I was feeling kind of off, but I wasn't in labor. And we went there, and my midwife had checked me, and she's just like, "Yeah, no, you're not in labor yet, And she's like, "But like, you know your body, Tanya." So we went for a walk out in the park, and my husband and I came, and we had a nap. And I woke up from the nap, and we have no power. There's no
Oh
power in
my.
Saskatoon. I know, I love this. I always love how the universe does things like this because I'm just like, of course, there'd be no power because those sterile bright lights
Yeah.
really traumatized me. Like it was something that I could close my eyes when I had my twins, and that's the first thing
Still
I
see.
visualized. Yeah, is that bright light. So of course the universe would provide me with this dark, space that isn't isn't bright lighted. I'm in this safe place that my sister's waking up from a nap with no lights on. This is amazing. And so we timed my contractions and we're like, yeah, we're in labor. So family
Wow.
that was at the house was like, hey, we're going to pack up. We're going to leave. The space is yours. And in this birth plan, I'm like, okay, this one I'm having the water birth. I'm having the water birth
Okay.
because I envision it. And at this time, my mother was quite active in my life, and she was in Prince Albert. And I said, come up. Contractions are starting. It's nothing quick right now, but make your way because knowing my patterns, they do escalate quite quickly. And so she leaves, and by the time she gets there, so an hour and a half later, I'm in the tub and I'm liking the tub this time. I'm in the water and my midwife shows up, and like there has to be two midwives at each birth, right?
Yeah.
Because they need one for mom and one for baby, which again, like there's so many beautiful things that the midwives offer that just makes sense. I'm like, oh, that makes sense, but we don't really think about it until it's brought to our attention. And so they're setting up the birthing pool for me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, and everything is dark, and I'm playing music, like very meditative music, and my body just found this like pattern within her home that I just wanted to walk back and forth with my head down. And then when the contraction came on, I would just do that like deep humming sound, like, oh,
I love this. Okay, keep going,
we,
please.
and so so yeah, I just found this pattern in her home space, and I was just doing those deep humming sounds. It was really deep in my body, and like with each contraction. And at this point, the tub is about like quarter filled, and I didn't even actually acknowledge like my midwife and doula, or my midwife. Both midwives were like, "If you need us, we're here," and I was just like, "No, like just let me be my animal instinct self and just kind of do my thing." And my husband was helping fill the water, and I went into the bathroom again without having this piece that you have now placed for me. Why that position is just so freeing to me. It's just like, and I was like, I need to go on the toilet.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and the bathroom is quite like contained, and so my mom is like right in front of me, and I'm fully spread out and I'm breathing. And at this point, I could feel, so I'm only like 3 hours into labor, of heavy labor, and everything's transitioning quite quick. And I remember just breathing through, and it was probably about like 5 contractions. And I looked up at my mom and I said, I can't do this. I can't do this. And it was like that recall of transition all over again, right? When your body tells you you want to quit. And I was like, this is like anything in life, Tanya. Like when you feel like you can't push past, when you just stick with it and stay with it, you will find the glory at the other side, right? And so my mom looked up at me, and I could tell that I looked quite exhausted, and she looks down, and all I hear her yell is, "It's coming!" Because my baby was crowning, and we didn't know the gender of our baby, and so because it just didn't really matter to us, and so she yells this, and the midwives are like, okay, and they're just calm, just they bring this like calm and collective energy, right? Okay, Tanya, like, how are you feeling? And I was like, yep, I want to catch my baby, and I want to do it myself. And they're like, okay, and so like she just like had her everything there support. My husband's trying to fill up the pool, and he's like, the pool's not done. And I'm like, scratch the pool, we're like, this is where we're having our baby, on the toilet. And I took one last breath with that contraction, and I pulled our baby up, and just this like pure bliss in myself and in my husband and in my mom and in the midwives. It was just this complete utter joy that just occurred, and we just sat there and cried, and we had no idea, we didn't even really look at the gender, nothing. We were just completely enthralled in the moment. And the midwife said to me, like, I know how much a water birth meant to you, Tanya. Do we want to go over there? And I said, yeah. And so still attached, we walked over, I got in the pool, and my husband and I laid with our baby for quite a while, just embracing her in the pool until it was time for us to get out and to take the next chapter. And so I got to end my birth story on this like beautiful, yeah, more, it was the most internally healing experience I could have asked for. And that connection, and my postpartum, just I healed so well, and I felt so good, and I was able to transition into, I had 4 other children, and so like transitioning all us in, it just, there was a layer of ease. And so yeah, it was a full circle for me, and I feel so grateful to also to have had experienced both ends of the spectrum, because it gave me so much more gratitude for you women as birth keepers, because um, it's such a special time in a mother's life, and it's just so nice to feel fully supported and held in the container of another woman in that process. And so yeah, I thank you for letting me share all that, speak into that, and shine up. I feel like I'm just like beaming.
Yeah, I feel it. I just love it. I'm like, I always, like I said, get giddy about birth. So it was just like you said, the full circle of birth. I was like, yay! It was kind of like one of those stories where at the end you've got like the happy ending, like woohoo, we had the climax, and then boom, happiness. So yay!
It's so true. That's exactly what it was. It was honestly that wave. Yeah,
Well, I
it's
really
mind
think
blowing.
that it was so special for you that you got the first birth that way, that it kind of gave you like how you knew you exactly wanted to be treated. And that helped you, I think, with the second, at least from an outside perspective looking in. And that was just
Yes.
like, I'm just so happy. That was a wave
I,
of emotions even for me listening. I was like, whoa!
you're so right. I think by like setting that tone, knowing knowing what it can be. And I think that's where, like, a lot of times when we don't have that um, first experience that maybe feels that way in our body, um, we don't know any different.
Yeah.
And so birth can be terrifying, right? Birth can be like there can be a lot of fear around that. And so and don't get me wrong, birth is difficult,
Yeah.
right? Like we know that, like it's messy and difficult and laborious, but it's also the most incredible. I think, don't they call labor or like sorry, a contraction, a heightened orgasm. I believe it uses like
Yeah.
similar muscles. Yeah, like
Yeah.
how even to think of that concept. Like it's the most pleasurable sensation in life, but yet the most challenging to achieve. Yeah, pretty neat.
I love that you got to share that. And you already, one of the questions inside, and that's why I'm trying to work this a little bit better, is that was like, did you have a duo? Which you had already answered like on all the accounts. And then the last question is like, what tip would you have for any other mothers out there that could be listening that either are possibly like, it could be anything, just like another tip that you want to kind of give and share?
Oh, you know what? Now being on the other end and um, watching other women, I would say the best tip for when you are expecting or experiencing is to listen to different birth stories, because I think that even if we listen to all the different variations of stories, um, we will we will take what we need and we will leave what we don't need,
Yeah.
and you will know what feels right in your body. And I think by hearing other women's experiences, it gives you insight on how you want yours to feel. And it's great to hear even about like I love holding space for women that have had trauma within their births, because um, that's a piece of it too. But that doesn't have to be all of it, right? There can be beauty even in those traumatic experiences. And so, yeah, just to listen, to be open minded and listen to other women's birth stories. That would definitely be my tip. And to
I love that.
find your support, find your women support. Women, like when it says a community raises, it takes a village or community to raise a child. It takes a community or village to support a mother from trimester 1 to 4
Yeah.
postpartum. Like I could not have done it without my supports. And I have a huge mission now that's like in my body where, when I know someone's in that postpartum, that trimester 4, like, how can I support Fuel Your Body? What can I make you? I love dropping off like pending nurture baskets. That's like my thing I've been doing for the last like 8 years is I deliver these baskets like
I
full of
love
like
it.
snacks and books and just like anything that's going to make you feel supported.
I love that so
Yeah.
much. And I'm so glad you said yes to doing this with me. Like, this was
Oh,
just amazing. End off a really awesome day. Just make it awesome. I love it. Thank you so much.
I thank you. And I cannot wait to tune into the podcast and just continue to listen to all the other women that you have on here. And this is you. This is the gift, is you sharing the beauty of birth and the beauty and the gifts that you as doulas give. So thank you. Thank you for your work.
Oh, well, I love doing it. It would be a hobby if it weren't a work. If it weren't a career, it'd be a hobby. I'd be like, somehow can I do this? But thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and tune in next time for the next one.